So welcome everybody. We'd like to start with the territory acknowledgement. So we at Greenways acknowledge the First Nations on whose traditional territory our work is based, the Wewakai, the Wewakam, and the Kwika First Nations. We also acknowledge our Coast Salish neighbors, the Hamalko and Comox nations, who have close connections to these lands. So my name is Katie Lavoie. I'm the Good Food Box Coordinator for Greenways Land Trust. So we actually just launched this program in Campbell River yesterday. So we're at 585 boxes and almost 10,000 pounds of produce distributed so far. If you'd like to get involved in that program, you can send me an email. My email is on our website. And now I'd like to introduce Karen Cummins from Comox as today's instructor, who will be sharing her tips and tricks with us on how to prune apple and pear trees in the winter. The arborist and accredited land care practitioner's love for trees and everything living shows in her 40+ years in sustainable landscape design, garden cultivation, and management. Please use our chat room and send your questions to the meeting host for question and answers part of the program. We will be recording this session and we'll distribute the link in a few days. Enjoy the workshop. Karen, the screen is yours.
Thanks, Katie. Everybody can hear me, I'm hoping. Let me know, Katie, if you can. Thanks for, okay, great. Thanks to Olivia too in the background, making everything happen. And I'm really happy to be here with you tonight. I love pruning. I've always found the science of how plants and trees grow fascinating, and always felt privileged to be stewarding trees through good pruning and other good practices. I take that really seriously and do it joyfully. So I hope I can help you on that same path tonight. So just to recoup a little bit, the presentation is winter pruning apple and pear trees, so pretty specific because there are other fruits, but they are pruned maybe somewhat differently or at a different time. So we wanted to focus on these ones in particular. We also are focusing on established trees as opposed to perhaps very, very young trees. And we're focusing on freestanding trees as opposed to trees that are perhaps very dwarf and have been trained in systems that are quite controlled, like espalier or cordon or Belgian fence. So those regimes are slightly different. Free to ask questions about it, but we're really focusing on freestanding trees tonight. And one of the reasons we're doing that is because that's the common way we often see trees growing here, and especially if we buy a new property and move in and there's the apple tree. And it's often, or pear trees, they're often freestanding trees. So it's really good to know how to prune those trees you've inherited or maybe started yourself. So let's get right into it now with answering the question of why? Why do we want to prune fruit trees? And I'll just say that this tree on the screen here now is probably, I think, a really good example of why you want to prune fruit trees. If you look at this tree, you'll see that it has what we call one of the best shapes for freestanding trees. It has an open goblet shape. You can see the goblet here. It's kind of like this. It has very strong structural scaffolds. And then off these, you can see my cursor on the scaffolds here. And it has off of those strong scaffolds, it has a lot of laterals, also going out on a slightly horizontal orientation. And off of those laterals, you see lots of other little branches. And if we got up here really close, we would see lots of fruit and spurs. So this apple is growing like this, with the path of the sun coming down into it and being able to reach almost all, really well, almost all of those little fruit hands. So what that means, what that demonstrates, is that a bigger goal for us as we're pruning is we want healthy trees. We want enough fruit to consistently feed ourselves, our family, maybe a few of our neighbors, and we want a tree that looks good. So, and a bit of history about this tree in particular, if you want to think for a minute about how old you think this tree is, you might be surprised. This is over 50 years old, and it's been pruned for the last 20 years by my pruning partner, Pam, who you're going to meet in one of the videos tonight. And before that, it was pruned by her dad for the first years of its life. So this tree has a long history of really thoughtful pruning, and I think it shows. So the opposite will be what happens if we don't prune. And this tree is an example of an unpruned tree. So you can see at one time, way down here where my cursor is, it was trained to that nice open goblet shape. And then it got abandoned and it just grew, and it just grew straight up and grew and grew and grew. And so this tree could be a lovely shade tree. You might be able to hang your child swing from it, put your chairs underneath it. But as far as getting fruit, I wouldn't bet on much, because right here, inside this red line right in the center, there's probably about 0 to 30% of the sunshine at that point that there is in the outside. And fruit needs sun for fruiting sprues and new wood to develop, and for fruit to color up once it is on the tree. We need sun. So there's going to be very little in here, and this zone where it's probably 30 to 60% sunlight penetration, there won't be much, maybe a little more. So where all the fruit will be, if there is any, is right up here and down here. So, and at this point, this tree is 30 feet tall. How are you going to pick that fruit? So this is why we prune, is to keep our fruit trees shorter, where we can pick the fruit and keep them open so the sun can get in and create good fruit. So if we don't prune them, the fruit is smaller, fewer, and we could also very likely have disease issues. So just going to go back so you can see again the difference between those two trees. This tree is probably only 15 feet tall, so half the height. So refining our goal to prune to have good structure and for fruit, I'd say we want to refine that even a little more and have a goal of having what I call calm trees. So trees that we prune lightly every year. We focus really hard on directing growth, not just cutting any old way. We avoid very large cuts, and we also avoid very small cuts because they're not efficient. And we remember that the more wood we remove, the more it grows back. So if we prune lighter and more thoughtfully, we get a better result, we get a calmer tree, and we get, over time, it's less work for ourselves. So this is a lovely little tree. You can see it's got a lot of apples. And you're going to see this tree again later in the dormant period. So this is a really good example of a balanced pruning job. And pruning, we need to do pruning, but we also have to remember if we prune too hard or not thoughtfully, it can be a real stress on trees. And if we want fruit, we have to know our buds. It's kind of like, it's important to know your friends. And these, this is how we can recognize buds. These little, this is a pear branch over here. And these small, somewhat triangular shaped little buds are leaf buds, which will also turn in eventually to little branches. But these buds here, these fat little buds on these short little twigs, these are called fruiting spurs. Both apples and pears, most of their fruit are produced by these little stubby fruiting spurs. Here's the apple over here, and again, the leaf buds here, 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 and here are all smaller, kind of triangular. And here's those stubby little fruiting spurs on fat little fruiting spurs on short, stubby little stems. So most apples and pears, you'll find those fruiting spurs on second-year-old wood. So you need to develop some wood to get fruiting spurs. That's a given. And most of the fruiting spurs want to grow on a branch that has some little bit of horizontal orientation. Not so fine of straight up branches. You won't find them, or they won't be as likely on those. So it's really important to know the difference, because you don't want to cut off fruiting spurs thinking they're just silly little branches. And if you're directing growth, you want to direct growth with a leaf bud, not a fruit bud. So it's really important to get your eye around that. So now I'm going to move on to the basic cuts we'll be using in pruning and how trees respond to those two cuts and to certain tree strategies. So the main two types of cuts we use to direct growth, what we're always trying to do is direct growth, are removal cuts and reduction cuts. And this diagram here is a diagram of removal cuts. So removal cuts are cuts that we make. We take a branch off, like this in part A here. This branch is being removed from this branch. So when it's removed, it looks like this. When it goes through the whole season, the growth has been directed into these branches. So these branches have grown. Growth was directed there. It's really important that this removal of this branch back to this branch is done right here, where in the little diagram you can see kind of a little swelling, and that's called the branch collar. In this picture, this photo of a younger tree, it's not so much a swelling as kind of a wrinkling. That's the collar. So it's really important that our cut is done right here, not way out here and not way back here. And this next slide explains why that's really, really important. Trees are not people. Trees wounds or cuts don't heal. What the tree does is when a limb is cut or wound is made, the tree responses, biological responses, hormonal responses happen, and the tree compartmentalizes, which you can think of as walls. The tree walls off decay to stop it. And when we make a collar cut really well, right here, just outside that swollen area or wrinkle, this is what happens. The decay is walled off, and it can't go any further. into the tree. There's no decay going further into here. So that's an optimum. If we cut way out here, leaving a stub, the tree can't wall it off. And so the decay goes it doesn't stay out here, it goes in and down. The tree can't wall those areas off. It's walled this off. And also this tree or this branch won't close over. This will stay here and rot. And if we do this, go way back here past the branch collar, there's absolutely no walling off of the decay. The decay goes all the way in, all the way down, all the way up. So it's really important that we do these good cuts to protect our trees for the very long term. So done right, this kind of cut heals really, or compartmentalizes really, really well. That's very kind to the tree. And at the same time, these kinds of cuts are really, really good at creating space within a tree, so that open goblet shape can really let the sunshine in and create fruit. This is an example of someone who took the dictum of take everything off that goes up a little too far and did removal cuts all, whoops, sorry, let's go back there, all the way up the branch. There is one little fruiting spur, there's one little branch left all the way out until you get way out here on any of these branches. So this is an example of too many removal cuts. And the problem with that, of course, is that there's no fruit. There's no fruit, and there's not going to be any fruit for quite a long time. And also a lot of this growth out here that's been left, just left, is quite wimpy. And if there was any fruit out here, these branches probably wouldn't hold it. And so the consequences of the other consequence of all this being removed is that the tree will just throw up more branches in the spring. It'll just throw up all kinds of water sprouts that won't have fruit. So the other cut that we use a lot and is really helpful to both direct growth, but also to shorten branches and help us control height, is selective reduction cuts. And reduction cuts are either back to a bud or they're back to another branch. So in this case, we've decided, oh, this is too long, we don't want this here, let's remove this back to this branch. So then all the growth is directed that season into this branch. And so that's what we're showing here in this photograph right here. This little stem was going up, 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 up. And so to shorten it, we brought it back to this bud that's right here. And now the growth is going to come out in this direction, but shorter. And there was another branch where this red lion is that went up, 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 up. So we'd rather have the growth going out, a little bit more horizontal and out for that open goblet shape. And so we directed it out this way. So one of the rules, if you're going to use this cut to advantage to direct growth, is that this stem that we're directing our growth to, that we're leaving, has to be at least a third or half the size of this one we left. And you can see that this branch is easily that big. And that's really important to remember, because if this was too small, the energy that's going to be coming up this branch now, a very small branch would not be able to take that energy. And what would happen instead is right about this point, there's a number of little dormant or what we call adventitious buds that we can't even see. We don't see them like we see this bud, but they're there. And when we take off too much wood and the tree goes into survival mode, those buds are released and they go crazy. And you could get 3 or 4 branches here just shooting up back into the middle where you didn't want them in the first place. So it is a really important thing to remember. This branch that you go to needs to be a third or even better, a half the size of this branch that it came off of. And the overall result of sticking to that is really good. And this is just another example of a branch where again, these were quite long branches. This one was shortened back to here, to this bud, and now this bud is going to make another little branch going out this way. And the same with this one. We've shortened this long branch back to this bud. Could be half of the current year growth or even more. And now its growth is going to go out this way. And I'll just point out while we're on this slide that back here, and here, and here, those little branches were going into the middle, into the open goblet shape where we don't want so many branches. And so those have been removed. So again, this is all about very thoughtfully directing growth for that nice shape and space and bringing the height up. So the overall result of this kind of reduction cutting, we can follow this beautiful branch that's come off this little tree here, and we can follow it. It grew here, it was pruned. The next year it grew to here, it was pruned out to a lower facing bud. Then it grew to here, was pruned again to an outward facing bud, pruned again, pruned again. So we've really been creating a beautiful flowing branch and keeping it short. And at the same time, we've created these beautiful fruiting spurs. And if we look closely, we see them all through this little tree. So it's really fun to follow these paths, to prune and then observe what happens. So this is that branch that we just followed, is this branch. This is the whole tree, the whole little tree. And you can see the growth that it had put on the previous year. This is in the spring, this spring. And now as it's pruned and ready to grow this year, it looks like this. So very open shape. Growth is totally directed. Lots of little branches though still, but shorter. So what we saw earlier was very thoughtful pruning directed to a bud or to a branch that would take the energy. This is a result of not being selective where you make your cuts. So I can imagine someone going up this ladder and going, oh, freaking out, it's too tall, cut it. And cut it to what? Oh, nothing, just cut it. Didn't cut it to a bud, didn't cut it to a branch, just cut it. And so those little dormant buds that were sitting there burst out into survival mode. And you can see they're not really very nice branches. They're quite thin, and there's 3 of them going right back into the center. So it would have been better to have gone to this. What this would have been, this little branch would have been a bud. But anyway, this is what we call a bad hair day now. So this is that cut we made earlier to direct the growth out. So we're going to do the same thing here. This branch would be cut here where my cursor is, and the branch and the growth would be directed out into this nice branch instead. And more examples of what you might not think or want as a result is this is a tree that there hasn't been any space created in this tree. You can see it's just a forest of branches that's all going to be shaded. There hasn't been any removal cuts in this area to take out branches. All that's been done, as you can see, the top has been stubbed off, not selectively, just sheared. And the result of that was just that the tree is growing again up at the top. So not healthy, not particularly nice to look at, and not fruit. And these are more examples of non-selective reduction cuts on a really grand scale. This isn't a fruit tree, this is a maple, but you see people doing this a lot to fruit trees. And the cuts have not been made to a bud, the cuts haven't been made to another branch. This is basically topping. And the result of that will be that this has been done this winter, just been done, but I can predict that this spring, this is how this tree will look, because all those adventitious buds will go berserk trying to help this tree survive. And so you'll have a flurry of all these water sprouts that won't have any fruiting wood on them. It'll be a long time before there's any good structure in this tree. And meanwhile, these cuts here will not compartmentalize. And it's if you wanted a strategy for doing harm to a tree, this is a really good one. But it's not really good for creating a good fruiting tree. So what equipment would we use? Well, I really recommend bypass pruners, which these are, and bypass lockers for bigger wood, say 3/4 of an inch or 1/2 inch and bigger. So bypass pruners, the thing about bypass pruners is the blade goes by that the other piece. It doesn't smack into it. That's called an anvil type, and they don't make very good cuts. So the bypasses make a much better cuts. So do look for tools that are that style. And the pruning saw, when it's open, looks like this. And you'll see it in the video, we'll be using it. And then it folds up. So this is a really good pruning saw that you can get a replacement blade for. So do keep your tools sharp, because it'll make the job easier and it'll make the cuts better, and the tree will be able to compartmentalize those cuts better. And I would add safety glasses if you don't wear glasses. And I would also add disinfectant. And I use Lysol, the alcohol formulation, to disinfect all my tools in between trees or in between cuts if there's disease. And in the videos and photos to come, you'll see we're using pruning ladders, which are very stable. Really a good idea if you have a big tree or a number of trees. So what's the process for getting started? Well, we always start with the 2 Ds and the B. So dead and disease, those have to go first. So look really carefully through the tree for dead wood or diseased wood. And this is an example, a photo of dead wood if you're not sure what dead looks like. The bark will be starting to be dry and brown, shriveled. If you snap a twig, it will be brown inside. The buds will be dead. And if you just gently scrape, like I have here, this should be green, and it's not, it's brown, so it's dead. And then once we've taken care of the dead or the diseased or the broken, then we can look for what we call the third D, which is disorientated. So those are branches that cross branch other branches, branches that go back into the middle, branches that are just too close to branches that you would prefer to keep and have strong. So think again when you're trying to decide what's crossing, what's disorientated, up the path of the sun and that open goblet shape. And mostly we prioritize those beautiful branches that are going out and slightly horizontal to keep, and take ones that are too close to them out. So focus first on what you want to keep, because then what you want to remove is much clearer. And in this tree, my pruning partner Pam, who'll see her in a video again later, has marked. We've marked with flagging tape all the ones that we've decided we want to take out. We've already decided what we wanted to keep. So they were branches that were crossing other branches. We're keeping a lot of these ones that are beautifully going out, but we're taking out the ones that are crossing. And we're doing that at this point with removal cuts. They're going right back up to another branch. So at this point, and this is from another vantage point, so it's a little skewed, but almost all of the removal cuts have been made. So you can see there's quite a bit more space in here now, and you start to see the lovely structure of these branches that we prioritize to keep that move out, and they are slightly more horizontal. This is actually Lydia's tree in Campbell River. And just a little explanation about it is that when Lydia got there, all of these you can see here, these are all large wounds where someone took all these lower branches off, which is quite sad because it pushed all the remaining living wood and fruit quite high. This is a 10-foot ladder, so the fruit is quite high now. So that's a bit sad, and it's just something to think about when you're trying to work out conflicts with branches. So at this point, again, almost all of the removal cuts are made, and we're going to move on now to the next thing we'll do after this is we'll start doing some reduction cuts up here to bring those branches down, to get the height down and a new level of branches started. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen now because Lydia is going to share hers and play the videos that we made, which will show how we went through the process, how we flagged trees to remove, and the reduction cut.
So we've now got the flagging up into the tree, and this is just a visual cue that we sometimes use, not always, but we're doing it today, so maybe it will be helpful as a tool for you to use, because it is very visual. It reminds you what you had decided to take off, and this is a start. We'll go with the ones we've flagged now, and then we'll stand back and have another look. If in all the trees, we would start with dead or diseased, broken, and then start looking at disorientated or crossing branches. And that's basically the process we've already gone through with this tree. And there's not much dead. and there's not much disease that we're worried about enough to take off, but there's too many branches going up into the center. So we want to look at a few of these. It's this one here, going up into the center. Basically, all of the ones we've marked are going straight up into the center. So the ones we want to keep are coming out more. So now we're gonna get up there and we're going to start cutting them out, removing them by taking them out at the branch they're attached to. So removal cuts. We wanted to point out this branch in particular because most of the cuts we've been making so far have been removal cuts right back to main trunks or other main branches. But this one is a good example of a branch. There's two things about it. Is this in terms of pruning being directional to pruning for a reason to get things to go in a direction. This original branch would have come out like this, which would have been really good because it's going out and leaving the center open. But this was cut off, and so this branch has gone up and into the center into and we call this a dog leg, and it's often not a very good direction or type of branch. So this branch is now competing with all these other branches. So, but rather than take this whole thing back, we can simply remove or reduce this branch to right here. This will be a reduction cut, not a removal cut, so that we'll leave this branch to be directed out here.
It's going quite high up, and we want to bring it down, so I'm going to cut it back to a couple of branches to allow the energy to move out into those branches, and actually the growth will then come out and not go up. You can now see I'm going to let it go, and the branches then will come out as opposed to up. The branch is coming up and it's going again very upright. So what we'd like to do is almost start a second tier of branching here by taking off the upright, cutting back to this lateral branch. So we're just going to head it back to a branch that's going outward and encouraging growth out and away from the center of the tree and at another level. So we'll wait and see what next year brings.
Branches is a good example of how growth works. This branch grew however much until this point last year, then it stopped. We can see that by this ring here. And then this was the next year's growth. Last year's growth, and then the year before is this way. So this is all last year's growth. And the last year, this was just a bud, this little branch here. So it was a bud, say, like this one here. So we should think about that when we're pruning, because if I cut this branch back to this bud is going to go make a branch like this, but in this direction. If I cut to a branch or a bud on the top of the branch, it's going to make a branch like this one, up this way. If I cut to this bud here, I've reduced the length of this, and we're going to get this bud coming out like this, which, if you look at the beautiful shape of most of our fruit tree branches, it is that beautiful outward growing tip.
So what we did is we did go up there, and so for a lot of these tall ones, we brought them. We did reduction cuts, and we removed, let's say, remove this part here where my cursor is down to a lower branch. Basically, that's how we shorten a lot of them. And So in the end, Lydia's tree looked more like this. And again, this is from the other direction. So it's not quite a representative photo, but you can see there's a lot more space, but there's still quite a few branches, and it is quite a bit shorter. So we took off about 25 probably percent, and that's all I would want to take off. I would never want to take off more than that. And I'm happier at 10%. And Lydia's tree, because it is had all the growth of it pushed high like that and hadn't been pruned for quite a while, it was really more of a renovation job than a regular sort of pruning job. But this is the kind of thing that we do find when we inherit apples or just become interested in pruning, perhaps. So the renovation project like this will take some time. It didn't happen over one season, and it won't be finished in one season. It'll take a few seasons, and the tree will evolve, and it's all good. So this is another apple, and it looks very different from Lydia's apple, but the process that we would go through to prune it is the same. And you've actually seen this apple before. This is my example of the apple that was in leaf with the beautiful little delicious type apple. And that was that photo. And this is that tree. This is my friend Carol's tree. It's a tree that I call the calm tree. So this tree, like Lydia, Carol inherited this tree, and like Lydia, the previous owner had also cut off some of the very large lower limbs and had stubbed back the tree, gave the tree a haircut, so to speak, not paying any attention to pruning to a bud or to another good outward going branch, just pruned everything off. You can kind of see these old stubs in through here. And so she's been working the last 4 years to direct growth, and she's done a pretty good job. The other thing they did was they cleaned out all the little branches in here. So including pruning spurs. So again, it pushed a lot of that growth up instead of out. So we did the same thing. We looked for dead and diseased and broken. We took them out, and then we started deciding on which branches were those beautiful, good branches to keep. And then we flagged ones that were crossing or too close to or laying on top of those other branches. Like you can see this one here that's flagged goes from way over on this side right through the middle and into the other side. And when we get up higher into this tree and look down, we see here's a lovely branch coming out. But this one, because this is where those branches were stubbed way back then. So someone just cut them. The little dormant buds went crazy, and instead of one branch, now you have 4. Same thing here. Stubbed it. Little dormant buds go crazy. Now all you can have 4 branches. So all too close. So this one we're going to take out, and this one too, because you can see it's actually touching this other lovely branch that's coming out. So once these branches are gone, these 2 are photos of after. Here's this lovely branch going out. It now has space with this branch gone. And the same here. These 2 have much more space with that one gone. So they're gone, but they're not really missed. So it's another example of really directing growth. So at this point, all these removal cuts have been made. The tree is more spacious and less confused, but lots of branches, lots and lots of fruiting spurs. And I'll just point to this branch here at this photo. where the previous owner had hacked off a branch. It's not even a proper cut. It's got a long stuff on it that the tree was never able to close over, but it did throw out a sucker. And Carol was so smart. She left that, or water sprout, it threw out a water sprout, and she left that water sprout. She didn't just take it off as a default. She thought, that could be a handy branch. And it's true. It's coming into a space where there isn't anything. So, and this year it's actually got fruiting spurs on it. So that was really a very good decision. These are also water sprouts. And water sprouts, we see them in trees in response to wounding. You see how this water sprout here is coming right near this cut. And the same is true of all of these. And yes, mostly we do remove water sprouts, especially if they're going straight up, but not always. Have a look. This one has a nice, fairly good angle, and it's going into a space where there isn't anything. So all we did was shorten this one. We took almost all of the other ones off, but this one we shortened. We're training, we're directing a new branch, kind of like children. So at this point now we're just going back and doing reduction cuts, removing or shortening the current year height of the main branches by about half or maybe more, and directing the growth out. So here I'm pruning just above a bud that's going to throw a branch out this way. And at the same time, I've shortened, I've brought the height down. And this is the tree when it's finished. Lots of branches, not as confused though, little shorter. And this tree is 90% intact. So there isn't going to be a big response of water sprouts. It's going to keep being a calm tree, putting its energy into health and fruit, not stress of having to replace wood. So the 10% rule is one that I really like. I have a pruning budget of only 10% to maybe 25%. Pears, we haven't really talked about pears, but pears are pruned very much the same way. And the one difference about pears is that they really like, as you can see in this little pear of my friend Carol, this is about 4 or 5 years old now. They really want to grow upright, and we do gently encourage them to have outward going branches for a good path for the sun in. But we have to accept some uprightness, that just is their habit. So this one, we flagged some branches to cut back to. So we're going to bring the height of this branch down and send it out. If this branch, you'll see that this is the main leader that we want to be dominant and put out some more nice scaffold branches for the future. But this one is really competing strongly with it. It's almost the same size, and it's a very narrow angle here, which is not the best structure. So we're subordinating it to tell it, sorry, buddy, you're a lateral, not a leader. And the same with the other one. And this is the tree, the same tree, once those cuts have been made to direct the growth out. And these branches, these low ones, won't be there for long, but they're okay for now because they're feeding the tree. They've got leaves, they're photosynthesizing, they're feeding the tree. The other trick we used, because there's other tricks besides pruning for tree stewardship, is we attach, this is a material called arbor tie. It's a very soft but very strong material that won't harm branches, but it's used a lot by arborists for staking. We've made a loop around this bough at your pruning, and you actually get to this point where you have too many fruiting spurs. This will have to be something you think about doing, is removing some of them. There should be about 6 inches between fruiting spurs, and some of these are very old. So that may be something for everybody to look forward to. And again, there are other tools. So investigate a lot of them if you're really interested in really stewarding your fruit trees over the long term. Do you have fruit spurs? Have you had flowers? This is for when you haven't had fruit and you're trying to figure out why. And do you have a lot of fruit one year and none the next? Because that's often a result of letting too many fruits go in one fruit set. There should only be one apple in each cluster that's allowed to grow. And sometimes an apple tree or a pear tree will set 3 or 4. So you have to remove them, because if you don't, those extra ones, because if you don't, the next year your tree will be so tired and you won't have any fruit. So something to think about. Cross-pollinating can be an issue. Both apples and pears need another variety of pear or apple to cross-pollinate. Do you have pollinating insects? Gotta have those. Are you caring for your soil? Is that an impact? Do you have too much shade? And again, consider those conflicts that trees might have with things like grass or paths, and how you can adjust them to prioritize your tree, basically. So thank you. I really hope you can all prune thoughtfully and with joy, and do observe the results, because that's how we learn. Thanks. I'll stop sharing, and Lydia,
you can just keep sharing,
okay.
or not. This works. I've got the first question here that came in from Colleen, and she asks if, oops, now my chat window's gone. Here we go. And she asks if dwarf apples are pruned the same way.
Basically the same way, but probably not as much, because you probably won't have as much growth as the trees you've been seeing that I've used as examples here. And it depends how you're training them. And often the dwarf ones that we've got in really tight situations, well-controlled situations, like espalier or cordon, you might make training cuts in the spring, but most of the pruning is done during the summer.
Right.
That's one of the big differences. And all the apples and pears can also be pruned in the summer. In the summer, it's a great time to take off suckers in the summer because they won't regrow. It's a great time to do shortening to let more light into the fruit. But definitely with dwarf trees in the tight circumstances, there's more little picky pruning that goes on in the summer.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Karen. We have another question and comment from Sarah, who said that she has for sure made some of the mistakes that you mentioned before, and she's wondering what to do after. I know you've talked about that. I don't know, Sarah, maybe that got answered, but maybe Karen, you want to comment on this?
Maybe she can tell me what mistake.
What exactly? Yeah. So we'll just let Sarah comment on this.
Okay.
And I'm gonna search for more questions.
We've always made those. I'll make those mistakes, and they can be fixed. So let's explore that.
I know in the past I've cut everything that went up, for instance.
Yeah. So that really is a dictum that's out there and taken really to heart, but you can see, I hope you see now that what you're looking for is what you want to keep. And not everything is always up, you know. And if you have a lot of suckers, it's always good to leave a few. You might shorten them, but leave a few. Because if you take everything off that's going up, again, the tree just wants to recover. So if you have a lot of suckers, you might take some off, you might shorten some, you might leave some. I hope that helps. But yeah, it's a balance. So you
Sarah,
just have to start again.
Sarah, did that answer your question?
Partially.
Okay.
Having already done it, what do I do the next year?
Oh, you've already done it for this year?
A couple of years ago, actually.
Oh, so you could have more work this year then. You haven't done pruning this year.
Not for winter, no.
Yeah, so you could go out and have another look, see how your tree responded to all that pruning, and consider taking out some of those suckers that are very up or crossing, leave some that are slightly going out, and shorten others. Try that as a strategy.
Awesome. Thanks, Karen. I see lots of people here asking again when the right time is to prune, like when is it too early, when is it too late? I have Allison and Colleen asking this question.
So for apples and pears, structural pruning, like we're kind of talking about now, now is a good time. You could have started, early in January, and you could go right through, but it should be done before the trees start leafing out, or their blooms start opening. It should be done before then. So you usually have until the first, maybe the second week in March, but usually not much beyond that. I kind of start getting nervous after the first week of March. Yeah, and I wouldn't prune in the fall, apples.
Right.
What I do like to prune in the summer is, rather than in the spring, is all the stone fruits. So cherries, plums, peaches, nectarines, all of those late summer after the fruit is finished. And the reason for that is because they stay calmer if you prune them in the summer, and also that it's drier then, and they're all very prone to a disease here that we have in our wet climate called canker, bacterial canker. And so if you prune them in the spring, it's really much more likely to have that disease spread into the cut. So for those two reasons, I like to do those trees in the late summer.
Yeah. Thanks, Karen. Yeah, lots of people are interested in the plum pruning. So
Yeah.
Thank you for answering that.
Yeah, and maybe we can have another workshop in the summer.
I would like that very much. Yeah, we'll work on that if that's of interest, and that interest seems to be here, so that's great. I have a question here from Vicky, who is wondering what to do about her 20-year-old prune plum that is sending up shoots from the roots.
Oh, those are likely from the rootstock that her tree that gives her fruit was grafted onto. And so absolutely you want to remove those right at the base, as close to the ground as you can. Yeah, because they'll take over the fruiting top of your tree, and they won't likely give you the fruit you're expecting.
Okay. Interesting. Thanks, Karen. And then we have Valerie here with a question regarding dormant spray. Should that be used when pruning?
The question about dormant spray is an excellent one. Dormant spray, there's two components to it. there's the oil in the spray, which is meant to smother insects. And then there's the lime sulfur part of it, that's a fungicide to protect the tree against diseases. So really though, what we should ask is why you're using dormant spray. Is it a default, like mowing your lawn because you don't know what else to do? Or do you have insects or diseases that you do need to protect from, like scab is a common one. Do you have scab on your apples? You might need to use dormant spray.
Right.
The lime sulfur part. But know what you're trying to protect. Don't just use it because you think everyone else does. And you will get the same advice if you go onto Linda Gilson's website. She's the premier fruit and veg woman of our area. And that's where I learned that. Because they're not innocuous. The dormant oil, for instance, smothers everything, including ladybugs. So if you don't need it, why are you using it? And the same is true of the fungicide. So that would be my advice, is know why you're using that, and if you.
Right. Thanks so much, Karen. This is so interesting. I don't know if anybody has any other questions. Please send them along.
And if they don't, we could go down to Val's example.
That would be lovely. Yes, let's do that.
Let's move on down there. This is so fun. These are the references. This is a picture that Val sent, and this is of her apple, which, and Val can correct us if I'm wrong about this, but probably fell over in the rain and the snow that we've had this winter. And so, yeah, it would have been standing straight up like this, and now it's leaning over. And her question to me was, how do I prune this? I know I'm going to have to prune it severely in order to stand it up. So I hope you're sitting down, Val, because I don't think you can stand it up. It's too big. Even if you pruned it severely, it's a very big tree. It has a lot of mass just in the wood. And what I would say is, think about this, is just propping it. So you see how it's leaning here? And yeah, I can see how it's actually pulled up the soil here a tiny bit in its lean. But it's not really all the way over. And if you put a prop right here where my cursor is, like a big, heavy piece of wood, the tree would just rest on that. And you would still have to prune this tree because you've got a lot of broken stuff, and you would need to prune this up off the ground. But there's no reason this tree couldn't just be a little more relaxed. And the reason that I know this is actually the thing about propping trees is done a lot in China. You don't see it much here, occasionally, but it is done. It's a totally appropriate arboriculture practice in some situations like this. And the reason I'm very familiar with this is that this happened to my apple tree 4 years ago. This is my apple tree here, and it was standing straight up right here. And now it's laying over, just like yours is. And it's been propped. And I've had a great crop of apples every year for 4 years off of this tree. It's actually much easier to pick now. So just like you to think about that new paradigm. You would still have to prune this tree just the way we've gone through this process, take out the dead, take out the disease, try and minimize how much you do. Don't do more than 25% this year. Do more next year. Do more the year after. It will be a great experience. And then.
Oh, so Karen, it's Val. I just had a quick
Hi.
question going back to my apple tree.
Sure.
We do have a backhoe and equipment that we could use, but again, I don't want to damage the tree. So you think that it would be better to not even try with big equipment to move it forward, just to prop it up? Okay.
No, because roots have torn.
Mhm.
This is a big tree. You'd have to have big guides, like guying ropes, guide down to it to stabilize it. No, personally, I think propping is a better option and
Okay.
way more fun.
I don't want to lose it. It's just an amazing tree. And
Yeah.
I realize now that I overtaxed it. It gave us so much fruit last year that I probably am not going to get anything at all this year, but it just went all out on itself and we got amazing number of apples on it.
Yeah. So it's a new evolution.
Exactly. Yes. And start again.
Yeah, that's great.
Thanks.
Yeah. And your pear. So your issue with this one was every year you go up into here and you cut all these off, correct? And
yes, this is the way we inherited the tree, like this, and
right.
It's quite tall now, and it's just kind of a task now to try and trim it down. So I think I've
Right.
learned some things tonight to maybe leave some of those and maybe train some of the more sideways branches.
Yeah.
But,
So what I'm seeing, do you do much pruning in here in this area?
yeah.
No. So that's part of the problem because there's no space
Yeah.
in here.
Yeah.
The
Yeah, it's
only
your
place
thoughts.
it can grow is where
It's
you
up.
keep removing this. So
Mhm.
if you go into here and make more space, pick the branches you want to keep and start spacing things around them, removing around those ones you want to keep. So right away around, start making space and leave some of these.
Okay.
Then the tree will calm down and it will grow all through out, not just up here. And there's a thing called, when I really get into it, but it's called apical dominance. So all these tips here make a hormone that cause everything down a little further, not to branch out. That's called apical dominance. But then when we take all this away, again, it just wants to grow back. So
Yeah.
if you leave a few of them to go up, and you can gently over time train them out, then it doesn't go stupid.
Okay. So again, 25% trimming of everything this year, and then just sort of slowly work at it.
Yeah. You might take out more than 25% of these, but definitely don't take them all.
Okay.
So take some out, shorten some, leave some. And then definitely space all this out. And you'll see quite a difference in this tree.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. That's a big help.
Oh, so fun. Thank you for sending the photos.
What a coincidence of having run into the same issue. Karen, I have a comment here, an interesting one from Susan. And she says that she used to have lots of black spots, scab on her pear, which is about 10 years old. And she finally thought, oh, she should maybe feed it. So she put lime and seaweed and compost on the ground. And the next year, 90% less scab.
Yeah, that's a great observation. And she's absolutely right. Diseases get going in trees. They're really similar to people. When we're stressed, we get sick. When we're healthy, we can ward off disease. And so that's a really, really great observation and experimentation that she's done. That's really, really great. And that's the other point of relying on the other side, relying only on things to kill certain things as a way of control, rather than focusing on health. It's just like in pruning, we focus on the best branches and we give them space. So in other parts of tree work, we should focus on creating health. And then a lot of that stuff just goes away. Another disease called bitter pit, which people sometimes confuse as scab, is very, very prevalent when the soil is too acid, when it hasn't had enough lime. All you have to do is lime and bitter pit goes away. So, but people often think of scab and spray dormant spray, which doesn't help at all. So it's really interesting. Thanks for that.
Yeah, that is great. Susan had another comment, which is then also going to be our last one. She asks, what about pruning of small fruits, like one fruit for every two?
Does she mean thinning fruit?
Or maybe just picking one, leaving two?
Leaving two.
If Susan has a chance to unmute herself, I'm just gonna see where she is. There she is. I'm just gonna ask her to unmute herself to see if she wants to comment. Hi, Susan. Sorry.
Hi. Can you hear me?
We can hear you perfectly.
Okay. No, like pruning. Yeah, thinning is, I guess, the word. Yeah, thinning apples off. Like what I said is one fruit every 2 inches. Is that roughly what I should be thinning to when I have tons of little apples?
What you want to look at is the cluster. If you've got more than one in a cluster, all kind of on the the same cluster, you really only want one. And it's hard. It can be hard to do to thin those other apples. But the thing is that when you're there and you're thinning, you look for the best apple. You probably look for the center apple, the king apple, and you look and you go, oh, but and all these little ones, they also have blemishes and they're not as nice. And so you pick the best apple, you get the best apple. You get really premium fruit if you force yourself to thin to one per cluster. So, and if your clusters, if you do have a lot of fruiting spurs that are closer than 6 inches, you probably do have too many fruiting spurs, and you actually need to take off the oldest ones and space them. That's what I would say to get the best fruit and to keep your fruit coming regularly every season instead of big crops, no crops.
Okay, so you're saying one every 6 inches is just as an average when I'm looking at a branch that's totally overladen and way too much fruit. I know it's too much, but yes, basically one every 6 inches, the best one.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I was already talking and still mute. Sorry, everybody. Thank you. This is going so great for me tonight. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us, and Karen for this super informative talk. And I hope we will see more of you, Karen, this year, because there is so much to learn. Katie just mentioned she would like to learn about grafting. So if that's something we can run by you. No, okay.
No, but I can tell you who could.
Yeah, but I'm sure there is much more that we can work on with you, and you're an inspiration, and I loved looking at you while you were looking at our apple tree. I don't think anybody has ever given this tree so much love. So thank you for that too. And yeah, we will make sure to have the recording up on our YouTube channel and share the link with everybody in a few days. And I will also for sure share the demo and the resources.
Okay.
And Karen, sorry.
Thank you, Lydia. You've been super helpful and fun to work with. Thank you so much. And I'd like to thank my pruning partner, Pam, and my friend Carol, who shared Pear Trees.
Yes, Pam was amazing.
And thanks everyone for coming.
Thanks everybody. Have a great evening. Hope to see you again. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye.